Hey guys, Parfax here, and today we're bringing you another tier list video. So this video is going to be a PvP tier list based on the PTR patch notes and the PTR testing that we've done. So this is subject to change, but I thought it'd be a fun little thing for us to do. Now, we're going to be doing this based on OPR. If you want to see a war tier list video, let me know in the comment section down below. And honestly, that's not going to get fleshed out till probably a couple months down the road after the event goes live, or sorry, after the patch goes live. But it's just a fun little thing. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of it. So let's go ahead and we're going to zoom in a little bit here so we can see the tier list a little bit better. And we are going to start with the Ice Gauntlet. Now, with the Ice Gauntlet, we're probably going to put the Ice Gauntlet here in the B category. Now, the Ice Gauntlet's going to be a very good weapon, and you're going to run it with a lot of different things. You're going to see people running it with Fire Staff. You're going to see people running with the Void Gauntlet, of course, Blunderbuss, and sometimes even Life Staff. I've seen a few like Ice Spear, but it doesn't do anything particularly amazing other than Ice Shower is a very good tool to not allow people to come through the door. It's a fantastic secondary weapon. You can argue that it's the best secondary weapon in the game. You don't understand what I'm kind of talking about here. Most PvP builds and PvE builds as well have a primary weapon and a secondary weapon. Yeah, you don't get anything benefit and you can swap freely and there's no downside to whichever secondary weapon or whatever two weapons you want to run. But most builds are built off of one weapon. For instance, like Ice and Blunder. The build is built off the Blunderbuss and you use the Ice Gauntlet for utility. Same thing with like Fire and Ice. The main weapon is Fire. The secondary is Ice. Now, there are a few tiny exceptions, but we're not really going to go over those too much. But Ice Gauntlet's going to be a great weapon, and it's just a very solid B. There's nothing broken about it. There's nothing like crazy insane about it, but there's really not a whole lot of bad about it as well. Its damage output isn't quite there. If it had a little bit more damage, we'd put it in the A category. But outside of Ice Spike, which is kind of gimmicky and really only good against light armor users, its damage just isn't quite enough for me to really put it up in the A category. Next weapon on this list may be the most controversial, and that is the Great Axe. Now, before we rank it, let's talk a little bit about the nerfs that it took. The biggest thing, and people are really kind of going crazy over, and that is the change to the 300 strength passive. And that is now giving the 300 strength passive increased heavy attack damage instead of guaranteed crit on your light and heavy attacks. This means thwarting strikes does take a nerf. Still a very good perk on the Great Axe, but they moved that passive over to the 300 con. Now, people are really down on the Great Axe, but in all honesty, it's going to be an A tier weapon. The Great Axe has not dipped below the A tier since launch. It has taken nerf after nerf after nerf. And a lot of people talked about how bad Gravity Well is going to be because, well, now you can just get on 300 strength passive. But all the builds that were going to have the grit from the 300 strength passive, that's the only builds that can actually even get the grit anyway. So yeah, it doesn't change much. If anything, Gravity Well gets better and at least its CC capabilities. Now, they did nerf significantly the damage from the Gravity Well, and you're going to see that kind of across the board on a lot of these weapons. Did get a pretty big nerf. What they did was they just standardized the way you deal damage. So if you have something that does a lot of, well, crowd controlling abilities, CC is what we like to call it, then it's not going to do as much damage. Bow, spear, let's see, hammer, greatsword, rapier. Well, rapier lost the CC. Sword, void. They all lost damage on their crowd controlling abilities. And that is no different to the Great Axe with Gravity Well. Great Axe is still going to be a top tier weapon. Still going to represent a massive, massive percentage of wars and OPRs. But it did lose a little bit of its utility, a little bit more of its damage than anything. Now, there's different ways you can build it, and I can definitely see people going the 300, 200 route still with strength, and then going to more of like a heavy attack burst combo. But the Great Axe is going to be a lot of fun to see how players end up building it. Biss may become a little bit different now. The one other huge nerf to the Great Axe is Refreshing Move. Now, this means you're going to get a little bit more damage because you're probably going to get a third perk. Either that or you might go something like Enfeebling Maelstrom. Or, I mean, I guess if you want to go Fortifying Whirlwind, which might actually be viable next patch. We'll talk about Fortify here in a second. But yeah, so you're going to have to get a new Great Axe, but the Great Axe is still a great weapon. Still going to be A tier. It's still going to be very widely used throughout OPRs, wars, and pretty much any form of PvP. Next, the king of DPS, the Greatsword. Last patch, it was a solid S tier weapon. Everybody knows it was super sticky, crazy damage. And let's talk a little bit about the nerfs before we go ahead and rate it. So it did lose some damage on its crowd controlling abilities, just like the Great Axe. The Greatsword got a couple more nerfs in that category. But the big thing here is they took away half of the additional attack speed you got from going into Onslaught stance. So that means you're going to be swinging your Greatsword a little bit slower, but with removing the Grit and the 300 passive, they also gave it increased heavy attack damage, which everybody knows that's what the Greatsword strives on. So I haven't quite ran the numbers yet, but from my initial testing, it is still a decrease in DPS with your heavy attacks. So it's overall a nerf, but everybody's defenses gets nerfed, and that's why I wanted to talk about the defenses here in the Greatsword. One of the things we've been able to do in this game is essentially to have your fortifies basically keep you alive. If you're standing in a sacred ground, you basically can't die. If you have a bunch of stacks of fortify, have a health regen pot going, you almost can't die. Now, obviously, there are ways you can, and you can burst somebody down that's running 500 con, but it made it really hard. Now going into Onslaught mode with the changes, it's going to make you super squishy, especially in light armor. So what they did on the PTR is they took Fortify, they took a shovel, they dug a hole, and they stuck it in it. Even in heavy armor, you're not getting nearly the amount of defenses that you were getting last patch. For instance, if you're getting something like 20% fortification, then in heavy, you're getting right around like 11 or 12-ish. Don't quote me on the numbers. Medium, you're getting like 8, 9, and then in light, you're getting less than that. It's like 6 or 7. So you're getting significantly less defenses from that, which is really going to hurt these builds that want to go more glass cannon like the Greatsword. You're in there in light armor, trying to swing around doing the old like Hatchet Greatsword build. You got really hard nerfed in the defense department. Now, I think what's going to happen with the Greatsword, we're going to put it up here in the A categories. They're just going to go a little bit heavier armor. They're probably going to go a medium, either Great Axe Greatsword, Great Axe Hatchet, maybe even Great Axe Warhammer. Greatsword, Warhammer, Greatsword, Hatchet. I think it's going to be still a really, really top tier weapon. Still has a ton of damage. It has some crowd controlling abilities. It does have its stickiness or its tracking that got nerfed, and that is going to be a big swing for its, viability. But I think it'll be just fine. I haven't got a chance to test it too much on the PTR because, well, everybody is off the PTR now. I was testing mainly Firestaff. So, yeah, but I think it's definitely still going to be an A tier weapon. Still does a lot of damage, but not going to be quite as impressive as it is currently on live. Next, we're going to talk about the Great Axe's best friend. Its OG companion, its forever soulmate, the Warhammer. We're going to put it here in the B category. Again, sort of like the Ice Gauntlet, it does a lot of things. It's a very good secondary weapon, brings a lot of crowd controlling ability to the game. Great Axe can be paired perfectly with it. And even something like Greatsword could go really well with it. But just overall, the same, just as less damage now, and you don't get the 300 grit passive. But again, you didn't use it that often on the Warhammer. You didn't even need Thwarting Strikes technically on the Warhammer. So its use is going to be exactly the same. It's just going to do a little bit less damage. You're going to be not as tanky. Next, let's talk about the Hatchet. The Hatchet received a few different changes. Now, some of them are nerfs, some of them are, well, changes. And with the Hatchet, Defy Death was changed so that instead of actually getting the 3 seconds of invulnerability, you're going to get, I think it's like a half a second of invulnerability, and then you're going to go to 50% health plus 500. This is actually a net buff to some builds. I think it's better in PvE this way, and then it's better in PvP if you're using it as like a secondary, like with bow. Did a little bit of a get out of jail free card. But when it comes to the play style of, all right, I have my invulnerability, now I'm just going to stay in it to try to kill everybody, that got nerfed because you can still just instantly die after you proc it, but it does allow you to kind of get out of there and get back to full health pretty quickly. You hit Defy Death, you hit a pot, then you're boop back up to full and ready to go again. They also made it so the heal that you got from Berserk is now lifesteal instead of a heal. So that's a very big nerf. And then when it comes to some of its passives, they actually rearranged them to make them more heavy attack based than light attack based. This is going to affect both PvE and PvP. Really hit them, both of them, pretty hard. We're definitely going to probably just put this in the C category. This is just kind of a wait and see type of weapon. I definitely think we could easily make it a case to still being a B weapon. It's still a very good weapon. It's definitely in the like C plus. Sort of like the Ice Gauntlet. Ice Gauntlet's like A plus, you know, or sorry, B+/A, where Hatchet's kind of like C+, you know, maybe B- type of weapon. But I think it's still really good. I think it's gonna still have its cases, but it did get some pretty big interesting changes. And again, the light armor version of Hatchet really got nerfed because, man, you're gonna be super squishy now. Next, we have the life staff, and again, it's going up in the S category. It's our first S weapon, pretty standard. Now, there is some pretty big changes to the life staff, mainly affecting the players that it heals. So let's go ahead and talk about that. First, again, the defenses. They are running, most of them are trying to go to a version already. Now, it is going to affect the healers that do put the Sacred Ground underneath their feet when they're trying to survive. That Fortify is not going to last very long now, or it's not going to be very powerful now. And they made a change, which hopefully I'll be putting it up on the screen here, that whenever you have a Fortified Sacred Ground on your armor, now when you swap weapons, it's not going to proc. So I have to test this on the PTR, and we'll get to doing that here shortly. But I believe what that means is if you were on your back bar, and let's say you have your Rapier because you're trying to escape, your Void Gauntlet trying to help debuff the enemies, then anybody that goes into that Sacred Ground is not going to get the Fortify. So that is a pretty big nerf, and they nerfed the actually stamina regen from the life staff by half. So that's a pretty big change. There's another big stamina change that we'll get to when we get a little bit farther. But because there's no other healing weapon, and because it is just so strong and you absolutely have to have it, it is the easiest S in this category. Next, we're going to talk about good old Musket. We're putting it here in the D category. Now, Mortal Empowerment got nerfed. We'll start there. Mortal Empowerment got a change to where, well, they basically, again, brought out the shovel, dug a grave, and threw it in it. They went from 15 stacks for 20 minutes per stack, and then refreshes every time you get a kill, to 10 stacks, 2-minute duration, and it doesn't refresh. Mortal Empowerment's gone. Musket got a big change with its accuracy. I saw some videos where like, well, if you stand still and you put accuracy on it and you don't zoom in, you can basically bypass the old, you know, or the new accuracy mechanic. But if you're another ranged user, you know, if you're a fire staff, a bow user, if heck, maybe even a blunder player or another musket player, the one thing you want muskets to do is to stand still and be close enough to your target that you don't have to zoom in. So yeah, a musket may be completely dead. I'm sure somebody will find a way to break it and it'll be completely busted because everybody has less defense in this patch. So in theory, it should make the musket a little bit better, but they did receive some pretty massive nerfs. So we're putting it down the D category, but I can definitely see it going up to like the B, A category if somebody finds a way to really bust it. Next, we have the Blunderbuss, and I've heard a lot of people talk about, well, the Blunder didn't get nerfed. Well, it actually did. It actually got a massive nerf. Now, it didn't have much of its damage nerf. Damage for crit damage got nerfed across the board, which doesn't affect Blunderbuss too much because the Blunder doesn't really crit that often, and you don't really care to crit because your damage multiplier is so low. So, yeah, it's really not worth running it anyway. It wasn't worth it before. It's really not worth it now. But the Blunder's last chance passive used to be a 50% damage reduction, which was absolutely massive. And they changed it to Fortify, so that's actually a massive nerf. You will be significantly squishier on the Blunderbuss next patch because you were losing a ton of your defenses. You survived off of that last chance and your fortifications, and now fortifications are absolutely gutted, and your last chance passive went to Fortify. So you're going to be significantly squishier. Having said that, easily an A tier weapon. It goes with almost every weapon that we have on this list already. I mean, not really synergizing very well with the life staff, but you can play Blunder with Greatsword, Great Axe, Ice Gauntlet, Warhammer, heck, Hatchet. You can play it with Rapier, Spear, Sword, Void, Bow, Fire. Maybe not Bow, but other than probably Bow, Musket. I mean, I've seen people run it with Musket, but essentially Bow, Musket, maybe Rapier. Life staff, it goes with every other weapon on this list. Very good weapon, has a lot of uses, gonna be definitely a top tier weapon. We don't need to spend a ton of time on it, and I have a lot of time spent on this weapon. Rapier received a little bit of a nerf. The stagger you got on Flourish and Finish is no longer there. We're gonna put it in the C category. It's a good secondary weapon. You can use it with something like the life staff, bow, whatever, fire staff. I'm sure people will run like the flamethrower fire staff build with Rapier, but I feel Hatchet does a lot of what it does, but sometimes even better. Ice Gauntlet can do basically the same thing that the Rapier does, got a little bit different, you know, implications of it. I think Sword and Shield is a very good alternative to Rapier. So I just think there's other weapons that do what the Rapier does. The Rapier doesn't have anything special anymore. We're just put it in the C category. I use it still every now and again. But if you want to watch a video, I did put out a video on why you shouldn't use the Rapier anymore, or at least start looking to use other weapons. So yeah, Rapier, C category, not bad, just not incredibly good. Next, we're going to put the Spear in the B category. Now, before you guys go absolutely bat crazy in the comments about how Spear should be B or S tier, look, almost nobody uses Spear. Spear is super underutilized now that the Greatsword came out, and bow users just went to Greatsword, and then now they're going to Hatchet as well, along with Rapier. Spear's a fine weapon. There's some very good Spear users out there that can do really crazy cool things. But let's be honest, if you're really good with any of these weapons, you can do any crazy amounts of things. So Spear, B+, A weapon, not really widely used. It did get some nerfs this patch. It did get a lot of its crowd controlling abilities nerfed, which is a pretty big hit to its, to like sort of its one-shot combo. But a good Spear player can pretty much duel any other melee user. And the Spear is basically the king of all melee when they're fighting each other, if they know what they're doing. And again, I keep saying but the grit change does help the Spear, because the Spear typically didn't go that route anyway. And the other melee users really relied on it, and you couldn't get some of your CCs out because of it. So if they're not running the 300 con passive, then you'll be really well. And if they're running the 300 con passive, you probably are in good shape anyway. So Spear, B+, A weapon, could be higher in the right hands, but we're just gonna keep it right there. Sword and Shield, we're just gonna put in the C category. It's kind of, you'll notice in this tier right here in the C category, they're all kind of decent secondary weapons. All can be used as main weapons. Maybe other than the Rapier is just really bad as a like main weapon, but they all just have a little bit of utility. The Sword has more mobility than like the Hatchet. It has a little bit more killing power than the Rapier, but the Hatchet has a little bit more invulnerability. So they're all really good weapons, all essentially secondary weapons, but just kind of C category, still good. I still love the Sword and Shield a lot. I still will use both of these weapons. Actually, all three of these. I use most weapons in the game anyway, but I'll still be using all three of these weapons, just not quite as good as the weapons that are above it. Next, we have Void Gauntlet. D category, got it. No, I'm just kidding. It's A category, easy. Void, what can I say? Best support weapon in the game. It provides debuffs, buffs, heals. You know, what do you say? They did nerf Oblivion pretty hard. They did nerf Scream's damage as well. But Oblivion no longer gives back straight stamina, but it gives back stamina regen, which is significantly worse. So we have a nerf to stamina regen on the Life Staff. We have a nerf to the flat stamina on the Void Gauntlet and giving us stamina regen. So we'll have to see how that plays out inside clumps, but still a pretty big nerf. But there's no other weapon in the game. Kind of like the Great Axe, there's no other weapon in the game that can do what it does. So easily A tier. Now we get to the two that are, in my opinion, the hardest to rank. Now, I know everybody, I guess Fire, we're just going to go ahead. We'll talk about Fire first, because Fire is easy. Everybody wants to put it up here in S, so we're going to put it up here. Now, Fire is S tier, and it really depends on the meta. And we'll talk about that here in a second when we go to the bow. But Fire is going to be probably one of the most used weapons. It's going to be up there with like Great Axe, and it's probably going to take over from the bow. But Fire Staff got a lot of buffs. Did get a little bit of a nerf. The nerf that people aren't talking about is weapons like the Fire Staff specifically that really, really relies on crit damage. Did get hit kind of hard with the vicious or the multiplicative critical damage nerf, but still going to be a very good weapon. I've been playing it on live already. So when it comes out here on the 26th or something like that, towards the end of this month, I fully plan to build a full Fire set. Actually, I have most of it done already. But we are going to be playing Fire. It got a ton of buffs. If you want to see some of the Fire stuff, just check my channel. Maybe I'll put some stuff down in the description. You can check it. Fire Staff, crazy good. Meteor's better. Pillar's better. Fireball took a nerf. Incinerate, could be better, could be worse. The way I used it in my videos, it is definitely a nerf. But it got some nice quality of life changes, some nice buffs, and we'll have to see. Fire Staff, really good, S tier, and everybody's super excited to play it, and I've been love playing it. Now, bow. Mortal Empowerment, nerf. 15% damage, nerf. Defenses, nerf. Critical damage, nerf. All nerfs to the bow. But the one big thing here is everybody's defenses have been decreased. And what that means is the bow gets to eat. And also, what is, bow is definitely not going on here. We'll put it here in the A tier for now. What is the fire staff's worst nightmare? Musket bow. Light armor fire staff gets destroyed by musket bow. So if fire staff gets too outrageous, then we will go like this. It'll be bow, then fire staff. If people aren't playing bow because they're tired of it, we'll go fire staff, bow. Both will be very viable. Both will be very good. So in that case, we're just going to put them both up here in the S tier. When it comes to the OPR, if you're going to be looking at the top of the leaderboards, it's going to be these three weapons. If we get a very heavy armor, very big tanky boy meta, your life staff, fire staff is going to be absolutely S tier. If we go to a more skirmisher playstyle with a lot of people kind of spreading out and not deathballing, then you're probably going to be looking at more of like the bow is going to kind of take the cake here. But the bow, we know it. Mortal Empowerment got nerfed into the ground. I mean, bow used it and bow loved it. Not as much, quite as much as musket, but it is still a nerf. But with everybody going with less defenses, that's the only thing the bow was really could not get through is a lot of times if you had a lot of defenses. So if you're planning on going a lot of fire staff mages, the bows are just going to eat you up. But all right, guys, let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this video. Where'd I go right? Where'd I go wrong? Is musket gonna be this D tier weapon? Or look in the comments. All right, so if you guys got to this point in the video, I want you to look down in the comments, because if this video has been out for a little while, I almost guarantee you there's gonna be a spear in there. Spear user saying that I completely missed spear and how dumb I am for putting spear in the B category. And just don't flame them. Just reply to them. Just say hi. Just say hi. Every time I put a list out here, spear users, they get real mad at me. But yeah, so if you see them there, go ahead and put hi in the comment section down below. Well, I have no idea because they probably didn't get to this point in the video. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Like always, we'll have more videos. Hopefully the audio is fine. I've been messing with it for a long time. We got some different setups here, so we're trying to get it all taken care of for you. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe like always, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.